Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of History After Hours. My name is Kevin Pumphrey and with me like normal is Mr. Ron Franklin. Mr. Jeremy Nixon couldn't be with us today. The day's date is September 8th, 2021, and we are starting a brand new season, Season 7. So we are happy to be back at school. As a matter of fact, that's what we start talking about, is the difference it is being back at school now compared to what it was like last year. We also start talking a little bit about Afghanistan and some of the stuff that happened in politics. We mention a few pet peeves, and we kind of end our discussion talking about what is more influential, plastic or rubber? Anyhow, with all that said, we're glad to be back, and we hope you enjoy the podcast. All right, it is a new season, a new year, a new school year for History After Hours podcast. What season is this?
7.
7.
Yeah, that's crazy to think, right?
It is crazy to think.
We're on the upside. We're working on a decade here pretty quickly. That's interesting.
It seems like we just had the conversation in the hallway about, hey, you want to start a podcast? And I had just started 7 years ago. I had probably been listening to podcasts for maybe a year and a half, 2 years. But that was it, you know. And of course, there's a lot of people today that still don't know how to get them or listen to them. But now, they're huge. But yeah, 7 years. So we were in it pretty early on.
Right. Yeah, and you're the one who really, I had heard the word podcast before, but I didn't really listen to any. I didn't follow anybody. And so that when you were telling me about your experience and going, dude, I'm learning so much stuff. There's so many cool podcasts. And I'm like, well, I need to check that out. I never dreamed that we would actually do one and have one last this long for sure. You know, It's kind of a novelty idea. Yeah, cool, we'll do that. We'll throw some words out there and see what happens. But wow, it's like we've done really, it's sustained, and that's pretty cool.
I was driving from where I lived to here took 45 minutes and then 45 minutes back. And when you're driving, podcasts are perfect because you're just, I say we're going through another audio renaissance right now, like when the radio was invented in the 1920s, because podcasts allow you to listen, learn, be really close to people. Like it feels like you're kind of right in the room with them. They're talking in your ear. You got these earbuds in, but yet you can also wash dishes. You can drive, you can mow, you can be productive in your everyday life.
And you can meet people that you didn't know that you would have anything in common with.
Oh yeah,
right. Through what they might say, and maybe it's a named person, a celebrity or somebody that you may have seen on the big screen. Maybe you respected them for their work, but then you kind of, and I say meet them, I don't mean like in person, but kind of, because you get to see a different side of them as they're just sort of talking on, and I like people who have who have different takes on things than what I've heard before, and there's a lot of that out there as well. And I don't mean just trash, you know what I mean? Like really intellectual people who've done some really deep dives on things. Like you can really explore some.
Just think about that. Some of the smartest people that are living have podcasts, and you can pick their brain. Like they can they start talking about whatever they're an expert in, and you can learn so much from people that you would never have contact with unless you read one of their books or something. Mm-hmm. And you can get a weekly session, basically. It's like great courses in history, those great courses things. Yeah, so podcasting, and it's a way to get our ideas out there to our students, because this is a whole nother...
And former students.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who have gone on, graduated, done their thing, and are now, functioning adults, and they'll still contact me and go, well, hey, we're still listening to y'all. We're checking in on you. What's going on,
Yeah. I thought the importance of our podcast at first was going to be teaching our students and former students historical stuff, which it still is a little bit. But I think now it's gotten to where we're two people they trust to provide them with at least something we think is true, and they trust us to do our best to figure out, stuff. And that's hard to find.
That's one of the selling points I throw at kids when I'm saying, look, if you want to participate in this, especially when we do the live audience thing, we're two adults who will never lie to you on purpose, for sure.
Yeah.
But if I'm going to say something, I feel that it is right, and it's backed up with some credibility because we have studied and we do talk to each other, and we don't want to say things that are just random. I mean, if they ask us a silly question, we'll give a silly answer probably. But realistically, I think that is a rare commodity in a lot of adolescents' lives, or maybe just in people's lives in general, that you ask somebody a question and they will give you a straight answer as best as they can. And if they don't know, that's the other good thing about you and I, is that if we don't know something, we'll admit it. I don't just make something up. Let me just wing this. I mean, if I don't know, I will tell you. And if I think I have an idea, I'll tell you, well, I think it's this, but we might have to check. So, but again, I think that there's a lot of people, think about your own life growing up especially, where there are lots of people that you found highly credible, that you could feel confident enough to go to with whatever question you had, regardless of what the subject matter was. Like,
of course, it was a teacher. It was my parents. It was people I knew. Mm-hmm. And today I think the students are overwhelmed by so much information out there with the internet, and so much distrustful misinformation that they need a reliable source that they could at least go, I wonder what the podcast is about this week or this month or whatever, however often we record it. Mm-hmm. Of course, we've been doing a lot of live stuff that we haven't been recording here at school, which has been useful as well. But yeah, I just think the trust factor, and at the end of this, I do want to kind of talk about the future of mainstream media and where we think that's headed.
Okay.
And I also want to make sure that we mention that there's a voice missing between the two of us.
Right.
There's usually a third voice. Mr. Nixon had prior arrangements. There was some miscommunication, and he couldn't make it. So that's why it's just me and you. It's like old school days.
Old school, back to the old school.
Yeah, so our lawyer friend is not here. So if we have any law questions, we'll just have to wait.
We'll have to postpone those.
Yeah. But between the three of us, we usually can answer about anything. Let's start here. So this is a brand new school year. I mean, it's September 8th, so we're swinging now. We're in the middle.
Yeah. Okay. Let's start right there for a second. And I think we've talked about this on a previous podcast, maybe even last year at this time. So many schools just started across the country. I saw that on the news the other night. Well, after Labor Day, and all the kids are going back to school, and then you get into the whole should they mask, should they not, and that controversy going on in these other places. We've been in school almost a month already.
I know.
So that's weird to me that there are places that are just now going back and just now dealing with some of the things that we've been dealing with, But anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, every state has their own system, and I know some states do more breaks, but they go to school more in the summer. It's not year-round education necessarily. We get out at whatever the end of May, and then we come back. Really, it's mid-August.
We're back in the building 1st of August.
Yeah, we're back early for teacher stuff. But let's compare, because I know last year about this time I was starting to get depressed. The depression was settling in 1 year ago when I realized that virtual education wasn't working.
I was still really slightly on edge, to tell you the truth, last year this time, because we were still trying to wade through what this was going to look like. Mm-hmm. We didn't know, because we had heard and we had been instructed a couple of different ways throughout the summer. Remember, they were like, well, you can teach live and then you can't teach live. And what are you going to do with the kids that are online? And how many kids are going to be online? And how many are going to be sitting in front of you? And what do you do if they ask a question? And all those things were things that we had to figure out in real time. And so, like I said, 3, 4, I guess this is the 4th week in now. Mm-hmm. I was still going, okay, what is this really what my life is going to be like, to do it this way? And sure enough, and once we found our path, each of us, as best we could, and we kind of hammered it home, But I'm so glad that this year is not last year.
Yeah, I mean, face-to-face education is still the best way to teach students, in my opinion. It could be a combination of several things, but I think the technology is just not there that can simulate what we do live in class.
I'm glad that we had the option to send students home in that moment where we didn't know how to protect them. It's all brand new, especially that when in March 2020 when we sent everybody home the first time. Hey, everybody, here's a Chromebook. Hey, everybody, we can get you internet access, but it may take a minute. And then we give the things online. And then last year with so many kids, I'll bet 85 to 90% of my kids on any given day were at home.
Yeah.
And so trying to communicate that way, at least we had the technology to make something out of that. Now, what they did on their end was something that we could talk about too. Last year was a black hole for a lot of kids across the nation from what I've read, and more that we're finding out about it. But like I said, at least we were able to pivot, but I don't ever want to do that again. I don't ever want to do that again, because I needed it too, to have kids back in front of me.
Yep.
It makes me better. The energy is better. They appreciate it more, I think, because I've had so many kids come back in here and go, God, it's so good to be back in the classroom. And it wasn't just about being near their friends, although that was part of it, the social aspect of it. You know, we are masking here on campus, by the way, at this point. And as far as I can tell, in my classrooms, nobody's having a problem with that. Like, everybody seems to be breathing well and functioning well in spite of the mask. Even, I know some people are really angered about that. Maybe we talk about that too later. But the overwhelming response that I've had from my kids, from what they've said and how they've acted and how they've engaged, is that I can tell, whether they've said so or not, I can tell that they missed being here with us. Mm-hmm. That they realize that you can't replicate what we do in the classroom live in a digital format. And you can't truly replicate it. You can get, a feel for it, but it's not the same because I use the word dynamic again. The dynamic is different.
Oh, yes.
Right? When we're having to communicate through email, or if there's a Zoom thing, or what if the thing breaks down, or what if people's audio isn't working. I mean, there's so many ways that it could just go, it was so tiring, don't you think?
Yeah, I think first, being on campus does something to your brain. There's something that gets going, like you're here to learn. That's so different than laying in your bed at home. Number two, how much of communication is nonverbal? Like when you're walking up to students and talking to them, there's a lot more going on than just the words that are being said. Mm-hmm. So if you're at home laying in bed listening to me teach, that's way different than being in class listening to me teach and me walking around and having other students around you asking questions, discussion. I mean, and all being focused on the same topic. It's night and day. I do think there is a place for virtual learning. I think it still could be the future of education, but I think the technology has to get to a point where we can simulate more of what we do.
We've learned lessons from last year's episodes, and I think one of them is that it's going to take a whole lot more personal responsibility on everybody's part. Parents learned that they can't necessarily motivate their kids. The kids were going through depression. They were trying to find ways around it. What's the easiest path through? We had kids who got, because we teach in the high school, we had kids that got jobs. Now what do you do? Some parents needed them to work because they had lost their jobs because of COVID. It's just there was so much heaviness from last year. And not that we don't have to deal with that, because we do, but we can parse it out now and we can shelve parts of that and really learn from the experience and go forward. But like I said, maybe digital is the wave of the future, or some sort of combination of the live teaching and the digital aspect. But I know from my own well-being, and maybe it's because I'm older, I don't know. I just don't think I could do it.
Well, I
discovered my love. I wouldn't want to do it that way again.
Yeah, this year I discovered my love for teaching again, because it's so nice to have 20 or so students in there looking at me when I'm telling a story I love. And I'm getting excited about something, and they're with me on it, and we're going. Last year was just so different. There's 4 or 5 students in class. The rest of them are at home. And just knowing that changes my mindset. Like I said, everybody probably knows by now, I play music. When I show up and play a gig where the audience is up and dancing and they're right at the stage and they're yelling, my energy goes through the roof, and I have so much more fun than when there's 2 tables and they're barely paying attention and we're background music.
Right.
And I felt like
you become music.
Yeah. And literally I felt last year teachers were background music. We were just kind of doing our thing and trying our best, but it wasn't really getting
I think you're right. I think for a lot of kids that's exactly what we were. And I wouldn't even necessarily say music. In some kids, I think we were a background nuisance. We were like just static for a lot of kids, and that's such a shame. And we're actually seeing some of the ramifications of that this year with kids that aren't necessarily as able as they would normally be at this stage, regardless of which level of classes you're teaching. I think there's this across the board sort of like, there's a gap.
Yeah, I think I've noticed that already in just a little bit that I've done with the writing and stuff, like even handwriting. Mm-hmm. I noticed that a lot of my students, their handwriting seems worse than normal. And maybe it's because a lot of them didn't write at all last year. You forget how much your handwriting
maybe a full year worth of just typing if you did anything at all.
Right, yeah. Like in 10th grade, your handwriting can improve a lot. But if you're not writing for a whole year, And maybe you didn't do much at the end of ninth grade either. I mean, like, it's been a while since you've had to handwrite stuff. And I still think that's important.
Well, yeah, it's a skill that you can lose. The muscles in your hand can atrophy, and you can lose muscle memory. Mm-hmm. And so we, case in point, we gave a timed writing the other day, about a week or so ago. And a lot of them were like, what do you mean? I'm used to having like 2 or 3 days to write something or type something. I don't even write it, but I'm not used to a time. Like, I can't do this. Yes, you can. Everybody can do it. Thousands of kids have done it before you. You can do it too. And so we give them that encouragement. But they did struggle. They really did struggle with and the handwriting was part of it. I can type faster. But I'm like, I want you to handwrite this. It's important for you to have handwriting.
And handwriting, studies after study shows comprehension goes up
when
you
different.
handwrite.
It is different, and there's plenty of research to back that up, although I can't name anybody off the top of my head, but we could look it up if you just really want to know that, or you could look it up, listeners. There's a cognitive difference between what you do when you write. You're crafting
You're
it.
shaping the letters instead of just pushing a button.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's a different, and you have a different. Your brain has a different response to what you're doing too, and the idea that you can hang on to it longer. It's more likely to go into long-term memory than it is just stay in that short-term memory and bounce out.
Right.
Yeah, they're gonna have to readjust. I mean, I think some of them are already. But at first it was very much like. There was a shock wave, I think, that went across the school.
Yeah. Our challenge now is how do we get this group back up to speed where we don't have this lag for the next 2 or 3 years? Like, we gotta push them faster and further than we would normally have to. And that's going to be interesting to see. Or it could be that the shutdown last year might drag on, hurting us. It might take us 2 to 3 years to get going again from that younger grades.
It may be. Especially for the ones who didn't. I mean, the ones who tried last year and really, because there were some kids who did it well, you know. But by and large, I think a lot of kids struggled.
And I would have struggled. If I would have struggled as a student, if they'd have sent me home.
Yeah, I'm not pointing. There's no blame in this. I mean, I think that I would have been that way too.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think students that age are designed to stay at home and just, all right, bow up and do your work. I would have put off stuff. I would have tried to get by with as much as I could. And when you don't have to be face-to-face with your teacher ever, it's a lot easier to ignore the teacher and the assignments and all that because you don't have that personal connection. That's what separates in-class learning. For all that we're talking about, the number one thing is that personal connection you have live in front of another human that you don't get virtually. And maybe the technology will get to make that indistinguishable, but right now there's a big difference between being in class and through Zoom or some other device. Mm-hmm. So
I'm like you though. I don't think that I would have handled that well if I was a teenager and going through this. Mm-mm. So bravo to the ones who were able to step up and do it well, and and encouragement to the people who struggled. That's that. And so again, we're not here to point fingers at anybody, but the reality is that we've got some kids with some. We've got to move forward, and you've got to work harder to step up to be where you need to be. Yeah, and we'll help you with that. It's not like we're demanding that you do things you can't do, right? We're going to help you, but I have realized pretty quickly that we've got to back up and really, really kind of push and edge and like I said, encourage people to, and you worry still about people's mental state. Yeah. There was a lot of depression last year. A lot of people were disconnected and extremely isolated. Maybe they were at home with their family, but that still were feeling alone, and look at what I'm going through. And there's a lot but I think that it's helped being back too with that.
Just getting up early in the morning and coming to school can help with that depression of sleeping in till noon, just being alone in your room all day. Like they're having to get up, and that's a skill too, just learning to get up, put my clothes on, brush my teeth, get out the door at a certain time, and then you're with people. That right there, that's our natural state, is being with people. So like I think that will help alleviate. Some students that had mental issues last year might not have them as bad this year.
I think about since you just brought that up, that reminded me. I've done research a bit on what happens with elderly couples when one of them passes away. Mm-hmm. Actually, not extensive research, but just casually curious about, because the dynamic is interesting. Sometimes, if the person who is left, not that they're not grieving, that's not what I mean, but if they continue to have a routine, they continue to get up, they continue to have a purpose, they continue to do things, they're continually active, they will be able to go on and continue to have a very functional life, maybe for years to come, no matter how old they were when their spouse passed away. On the other hand, if that person checks out of their normal routine, can't get back into a normal routine, let's say they go through a really hardcore grieving process and really, but then are able to get back on quote unquote track, you don't get up, you fall into a weird rut, and your whole, it's almost like your whole persona starts to decay. Yeah. And you can call it continuous mourning if you want to, but part of it is the fact that you kind of get used to not doing and not being part of anything, and there's like this seemingly, I don't want to get dark on us all of a sudden, but there's like this, you sort of lose the will to do anything. You're demotivated, and that just gets worse the more you sort of, it's like, I just want to relax, I just want to sit, I'm tired. Well, that tiredness can continue to drag you down. It's a weird sort of, I'm not necessarily going to use the word karma, but it's kind of like it starts to pull on you. There's a gravity to that way of life if you let that. And I think a lot of kids socially atrophied last year, which also ended up dragging them down farther. Maybe there's a lot of people who did face depression, but maybe it's because they didn't have a regular routine. Like you're saying, get up, come to school, make your bed, do something that's productive, even if it's just something that's simple. Yep. Make yourself get up and get dressed. I think that's one of the things I read too, was that one of the warning signs for elderly people that their health may be failing sooner than later is that they stop going through things like just, well, you know what, I'm gonna comb my hair today. Right. You just stop doing stuff like that. You just sort of stop caring.
Just stay in a robe and lay
around. Yeah. It becomes this weird sort of, I don't know. Like I said, there's so many different levels to human psychology. I don't want to.
I mean, it's mental, and you have to have purpose. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence, and I can think of at least a few elderly couples that somebody got sick, they suffered for a while, and then they passed away. And the perfectly healthy spouse died very shortly after.
Mm-hmm. It happens, yeah.
And it's that same thing. They couldn't replace that purpose. The purpose was, I'm with this person, and then the purpose was, I'm taking care of this person. Mm-hmm. And then when that person goes, they couldn't adjust. They didn't have a purpose after that, and then their health, everything can just decline so quickly. So I think there's something to
But
that.
on the other hand, there are people who just continue to go on, and again, not that they don't miss the person who's gone, but they find this vigor to keep going. I remember I was working out in Hot Springs Village. I used to work in grocery stores out there and managed a little bit out there. And there was this guy that would come through, and he was like this beam of sunshine, man. I mean, you could tell he was older because his hair was like just like white, almost glowing white. Yeah. But he had like this healthy glow and this tan going, and he was always, he's kind of bouncing around and, what's up, fellas? And he's always kind of jiving with people, And he came in one day. I couldn't tell how old he was. I just knew he was older than me. I was probably in, early 20s at that time. And he was like, man, I just got out on the golf course and I kicked some young dudes' butts, boy. I was like, oh, yeah? How old were they? He goes, I don't know, 65? And I was like, how old are you? He's like, I'm 82. And I was like, that guy is my hero. Wow. That guy is like rocking it. And it wasn't like he was trying to be a jerk. It wasn't like he was trying to be egotistical, maniac kind of guy. He was just he just had this zest for life, And I'm like, that guy, but he was always by himself. He wasn't wearing a wedding ring. Because I wondered, like, hey, you and your spouse. I didn't say.
Maybe he hated his wife.
Oh,
and she died, and he was like,
maybe,
yes.
maybe she was his anchor, and now he was free from that. I don't want to speculate. He went the other direction. But I'm just saying, but you don't have to go down those dark paths. That guy had chosen to be lively, and he was kicking butt wherever he went. That was cool.
It's choice. Yeah, you can make a choice like, okay, I can choose to be a little bit happier, a little bit more energetic, and then it'll just happen. And then your spirit, your mood will kind of lift up. A lot of it could start with just the choice to do it. Or I'm gonna accomplish this real quick today, and you do it, like you get up and work out, and then you feel good about that, and then that makes your whole day better. Mm-hmm. And then of course the opposite can happen, where you get up and fail at something early on. You drop your toothbrush into the commode, and then your whole day seems like nothing goes right that day. A lot of it's just mental. It's just the energy that you're putting out.
What my grandma would have said: wrong side of the bed. You got up on the wrong side of the bed, boy. I'm just like, today's not my day, Grandma. Yeah, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was something to it, Isn't it weird how some days are kind of like that, though? Yeah.
It is.
You could have 158 good days in a row, but that one day you'd be like, dang, everything's falling apart today. What is happening? Can I get a reset on this, please?
Actually, think about that time. Like in the morning, if I do drop my keys, or I forget something, I have to run back in the house. I think, is this it? Is this going to throw me off all day? I've got to reset.
You ever have that moment where you get to school and you realize that you don't have your school keys?
I've not done that yet.
Oh man!
Thankfully, I live so far away. I would have.
It's not like a big deal because somebody will let you in,
right? Yeah,
because you can prove that you work here. But it's just like one of those. Really, I'm such a stickler for routine in the mornings because of crap like that. I'm extremely. I know a lot of stuff, and I can spout off stuff that happened thousands of years ago and make it make sense. But sometimes I can't remember what happened 10 minutes ago. My short-term memory is kind of crappy like that sometimes. So I have to make notes everywhere. And I very specifically need a real constant routine. When I go home, I put my keys right here. And so it's a habit. But if any little thing, like you're saying, drop your toothbrush, something throws me off, then it could upset the cart for the whole day.
You know what my biggest pet peeve is? Or it's not a pet peeve. It's something that happens to me occasionally that makes me irate. And I don't know why. And it's not anything big. It's so tiny. And there's different versions of this, but I'll give you an example. So it's, me and my daughter are going to go play Uno. And so I pass out the cards. Mm-hmm. And you turn over the first card.
Yeah.
I guess that's Uno, whatever that game is. Yeah, I think you turn over the top card, and that's the one. And it's a wild card. Like the chances are rare that it would be a wild card. So you put that under, and the next one's a skip. And that right there, like the chances are so minimal that will happen. Yet it happened twice, and I have to redo the. I have to put that at the bottom of the deck, get another one off. I'll give you another example. We were doing group work the other day, and I said, okay, I'm going to spin this marker on the floor, and whatever group it's pointing the most to, y'all go first. So I spin it, it lands right in the middle. I spin it again, it lands right in the middle again. I said, and that I don't know why that drives me nuts, but it's when something shouldn't happen, but it does. Like, and I have to redo something. I don't know why. See, like that's such a crazy idiosyncrasy that I have, but I've noticed that about myself. I didn't notice that at all when I was a kid, but I've noticed that as I've gotten older.
That's funny.
That's weird.
Just little things like that. Like I don't know, work the way I want you to work. That kind of thing. Like,
yeah, it's odd. Like a big thing. My car has a flat. Well, all right. I mean, I just move on my day. Like, okay, I got to get the flat changed. Like, that's a bigger deal for sure.
You're screaming about the wild cards in Uno.
Yeah, I know. But really, that happens. But it's something that shouldn't happen that does. Like the percentage that the marker twice in a row would land right in the middle where I couldn't make it. Okay, sorry, I don't know why I just went on a rant there.
That's
it's the little things.
The little things.
This is why This is why men have heart attacks in their 50s. Right?
You keep it all bottled up. You've been holding on to that rage for a while now. You've never let anybody know that, and so here it is. Don't you feel better? Yeah. You're probably going to live 10 months longer now.
That's right. Yeah, I think so. I'm getting that off my chest. I thank goodness I admitted that to the world on this podcast. There's probably other examples I could think of, but okay.
We'll save that for next time. We'll get Nixon on that one because I wonder what his pet peeves are.
Oh, that's a good topic. Yeah, we'll save it. And hey, tell the story real quick about your mom coming in the other day.
Gosh. Okay. She's going to hear this, and she listens to the podcast. All right, so I'm sitting in the house the other day, and my mother lives near us, and so she comes in every now and then. And I was actually on the phone with a friend of mine. We're talking it out, and she comes in, and she has this book in her hands, and it's a book about 9/11. I can see the picture on the front is the famous picture of the firefighters there at the rubble of Ground Zero, and they're putting up the flag. It's just one of these most famous shots from that thing. And she looks at me as I'm talking to this other person. She just walks up, and she goes, "Do you know it's been 20 years since 9/11?" And I said, yeah. It's literally my job to know that, Mom. And I swear I was not meaning to be jerky, I guess. But maybe that goes to a pet peeve. Like I was actually, like she just suddenly appeared and I was talking and then she just starts talking to me in the middle of the conversation I'm already having. And so I wasn't like irritated, but I wasn't not irritated either. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And so I'm like, okay. I'm like, no. And I apologize for being a jerk to my mother. And I've already done that.
Or just being indifferent.
Yeah, maybe. Okay. But this is the most bizarre thing. Because after I was like, no, it's literally my job to know that. She looked at me square in the eye and goes, well, what are you going to do about it? And I didn't know what to say to her.
I'm trying to figure out what that means, really.
I think what she meant was, how are you going to be talking about it in school since it's been 20 years? Is what I think she meant.
What are you going to do
But
at
how
school?
she said it, it just struck me as weird because she was like, what are you going to do about it? And of course, the jerk in me, again, I wasn't meaning to be a jerk, but it kind of came out. And I'm like, well, I'm really having trouble booking my flight to Afghanistan. So I'm not really sure what to tell you. And she was like, you're being a jerk. And she walked away. And I'm like, okay, I promise y'all, I love my mother, and I would not be a jerk to her on purpose. However, that was just a bizarre little conversation that we had, and maybe that's a pet peeve of mine coming out. Like it was just weird.
What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, what are you going to do about that? And I'm like, well, I can't stop it.
Right.
That's really, even if I wanted to so badly, which we could talk about that. Would you go back and change stuff? Yada yada. But it was just a weird thing for her to say.
Yeah.
And the guy that I was talking to on the phone was like, did she really just ask you what you were going to do about 9/11? Like, yeah. I'm a one-man army. Here we go.
And we're going on 20 years. That is interesting because, I'm a U.S. history teacher. I will address that, obviously. And,
Okay, so here, my question for you is, because this always comes up every year, when we hit 9/11 and we're on a school day. I don't think it is a school day this year. I have to look and see. Next week's 10th. So it's a Saturday. It's next Saturday. But kids are like, are we going to study 9/11 today? And I'm like, I'm going to talk a little bit about it, but I'm not going to teach you about 9/11 until we hit that part of the story, because if I tell it to you right now, it's not going to make sense. Like when I promise you that we will recognize today. We will recognize the gravity of today. We will have a moment to reflect on that. But I am not telling you the 9/11 story out of context. I just refuse to do that, because you don't know enough about the setup for you to get the full impact of the story itself. When I get there, you've seen all these other things build up, and then you get it on a different level. If I just told it randomly, here we are, we're in the middle of talking about ancient Greece, and then all of a sudden I'm gonna throw the
11 story.
Yeah, that really will not work.
That's
so
definitely a non sequitur.
Yeah, so right. So I'm curious about what you guys do in U.S. Do you normally just take the day and go, yeah, here it is? Do you do it out of context? Because I don't.
I do a mini lesson now, literally 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And what it really boils down to is me just talking to the students about that day, how it kind of still affects us. So it's more current event stuff, and then ask if anybody knew anybody that was there.
Sure.
I did more of that after. Of course, I was teaching when it happened. And so the first few years, you didn't have to say much. Everybody knew. So when it came around, we had to address it because it was such a big deal in people's lives that for the first 5 years after it happened, like literally everybody, school stopped that day. So you talked about it. But as far as the actual story, like once again, it doesn't make sense unless they know the fall of the Soviet Union, what our foreign policy had been up to that point in the 90s, what caused, the Afghan or Soviet response, all that stuff that kind of caused this terrorist group to rise, and then the fallout afterwards. So yeah, it makes way more sense. I deal with this too during Constitution Week. I don't know when Constitution Week is, but I've already done the Constitution, and they're always like, "What are you doing for Constitution Week?" And I'm like, "I'm teaching American history." Will that work? Because it's like, or even like the Black History Month's in February. What are you doing for Black History? I'm like, I do it weekly.
Yeah,
like we're talking about the story of Black Americans all year.
Because I do world history, and people go, oh, what are we doing for Black History Month? I'm like, I've literally been teaching you Black history for months.
Oh, yeah.
We study all history of all the people on the planet, and we have been continuously talking about people in Africa, whether they are Northern African, Sub-Saharan African, or how how their technologies have grown out to the rest of the world, whatever it is. Like we have been continuously doing that and I get that honor the month. I'm not belittling that.
No.
But what I'm saying is I don't just wait till February.
I know, yeah.
To talk about Black history.
We talk about Black history the whole time. And, it does work out in early February. I'm usually talking about W.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington and their disagreement. So we definitely are analyzing that part of, and really that's like kind of the forgotten civil rights movement. what happened
the 20s
between
and
Reconstruction
Yeah.
and World War II. There was a whole movement there that people ignore.
We hit that in art history too, because we talk about Harlem Renaissance, and we get into, So there's a lot of cool stuff happening. But that's interesting though.
I don't want to put anything in a box.
Right.
It's got to live. It's got to live in what we're teaching. There's causes and effects, and the students have to. It's like math. You got to build it as you go. You can't just throw it. You can't just skip it and let's do calculus. All right, now back to Algebra 1, everybody. I mean, it wouldn't make any sense. So you've got to build it. And people think of math as the only subject like that, if you miss a day. No, history's that way too, because we go chronologically through events. And you have to understand context.
I know people that do teach thematically, but I've never really been that guy. I don't like that, because I am a cause and effect mostly person. And that's how I teach it. This becomes this, becomes this, becomes those things. And
I'm not as creative. You have to be more creative than me as well.
I've had teachers do that to me though, and I didn't get as much out of it.
Right.
They will sort of like mini focus.
Yeah.
And in a class like I'm doing, especially for my 10th graders, like it's pretty much a survey class. Like we're studying a lot of everything. Yeah. And then when we get to the AP classes, then we'll drill down on some specifics. Then we can be more thematic, if you will. But I still mostly do chronological themes chronologically, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and you do, of course you have to jump around the world. So you're talking about ancient India, then you're talking about ancient China, then you're talking about ancient whatever.
You ever seen these guys that teach it backwards?
Yeah.
We're going to start at the back of the book and move forward. Oh my God, that drives me crazy.
I don't know how they do it.
I don't think you do, because how do you get kids to adequately understand? Let's say we started with 9/11. I know that's not current, but let's just say that we started right there. And then you move backwards from, how does anybody unravel that to get?
Do you remember that famous Seinfeld episode where they did the whole episode backwards? And the way it worked is you have to have kind of a cliffhanger that everything's tied to. I think this Seinfeld episode, it started, they were in India for a wedding, and George said something like, "Oh, you can put your saris in a sack." And then it said like 5 minutes earlier. And then something happened, and then they said 10 minutes earlier. Like they tried.
Well, but that's like a little mystery you're trying to solve.
Exactly. But how do you make all of it that way? Like there's just, you'd get lost in the, it has to be chronologic to be too. My brain, once again.
You'd have to move to the next thing backwards and go, okay, boys, remember how this made that other thing, so you're actually coming forward again, and then back up. I don't know, it seems like double work. It seems confusing to kids. I need to see them build. I need to see them see that things progressed and built, and we learn from that, and we learn from those people, and those people learn from those people. Yeah,
and if any teachers are listening to this and y'all are successful at doing it backwards, I'd love to know how. You can,
you can
email or tweet us or whatever.
That. Sure.
But I don't want to be creative just to be creative. I don't want to be like, oh, I'm going to do this just so I'm different.
I'm just going to mix it up. No. Listen, until somebody explains to me and can prove to me that they've done it and done it well, I'm just going to stand on the idea that, if you're doing it that way, you suck. Maybe you get offended when I say that, other teacher or other teachers, but I would encourage you, tell me how you do that, because it doesn't make good sense to me.
Yeah.
Prove to me that is a good plan. I've never seen it work. I'll just say that.
Right, yeah. Maybe somebody's doing it and they have some system, but I can't get my head around it either.
I just may be dumb. I don't know.
Yeah. Can you give us, you're the world history guy. Mm-hmm. We brought up Afghanistan when we talked about 9/11.
Yeah.
I'm sure I know we've had students ask us about this situation of the United States after 20 years is finally moving away from our military involvement there. Can you give me a potted?
According to Lindsey Graham, it's only temporary. We're going to go back.
Well,
he said militarily. He said,
I assume we're going to go somewhere. I would probably guess.
we haven't left everywhere. I'm sure we can double down in other places that we are active. So,
and that's another thing we could talk about is, do we need to keep our military doing something?
Perpetual war. Well, The military is the military the largest employer in the country?
I would
the largest government employer, at least.
Right,
I would say.
Government employer, yeah.
Private employee. it's probably Walmart. It's probably the largest private.
Right.
But I wonder,
do you think of government military contracts?
How many people actually make their living either directly through or tied to some military action?
I know.
You know, I don't know.
Crazy.
I don't know what the number is. Maybe
and people
Nixon would
think
know.
of the troops, the actual troops that go to other countries, but there's so much humanitarian government contracts. You know, people that build hotels. There's people that
What the people that build the weapons, build the armor.
Yeah, and then you got to have
make the uniforms. I mean, there's
food
make the vehicles, and I mean, there's so much more to it. The electronics companies that have to be involved in. You know, I mean,
tech,
billion-dollar drones. Somebody had to build that, and some tech boys had to be involved. So their livelihood is based on continuous military action. Right?
Eisenhower warned us: military-industrial complex. Be aware of it.
I interrupted you though. What were you going to ask?
I was just going to ask you if you could give us kind of and maybe this is something we could say for when Nixon's here, so he can throw in his opinion as well. But just kind of, what's your takeaway now that we're out of Afghanistan militarily? Just tell me, because, you know, obviously there's conservatives now screaming that was the wrong thing to do, even though they supported it when Trump supported it. And the debacle of some degree that it was for us getting out, that definitely didn't look good.
It definitely didn't look good. And, well, okay.
Yeah, so just break down your takeaway from a global perspective of America's dropping and running.
I always look at this, and I teach kids, again, in context. We'll talk about the history of Afghanistan. We've already sort of previewed it with some of the early stories that we're telling, why it's an important region, why so many people want to control it, and why it's so difficult to control, why it's so difficult to govern historically. So should we have gone into Afghanistan is a conversation that we could have, although I don't think we're going to have time for that right now.
Right.
To go and hunt down the terrorists who attacked us on 9/11, okay, I get that.
Those are all debates that we could have, but
trying to find ways to support the government, which was it was a kind of a brand new thing, because there had been the Taliban movement, which had followed a previous really anarchistic moment where nobody was in charge. And so you haven't had a functioning government in a real hot minute or two there. And so I can see why, since we stepped in militarily to try to hunt down the Al-Qaeda boys, but we had to kind of go after the Taliban dudes too, because they were the ones who were allowing the Al-Qaeda groups to function inside that system. We didn't really target much about Pakistan, which I find interesting because a lot of them just moved across the border. Some of them were already across the border. So we tried a coordinated effort with those guys. But they had a functioning government, where Afghanistan really did not, except for the Taliban guys who, again, we were determined that we were going to uproot because of their association with the international terrorists. But after 20 years, man, I just wonder, would we have to stay there in perpetuity? Would we always have to hold their hand? Would we always have to be financing their military? Would we always have to be providing ground security? Because, I mean, at what point are you not responsible for yourself after 20 years? And again, 20 years, it is not like we've had a smooth transition at any point there, by the way. Yeah. Afghanistan is historically a tough place to govern. Okay, so I don't believe in never-ending wars. I just don't think that's a good idea. I think that we have to help people. I think that we could be good stewards with allies. I think that you and I were talking before, and you had brought up Germany, the fact that we still have troops in Germany, and we still have air bases here and here and here and there, right, or whatever, military bases. That's a good thing. Like to be there in a truly supportive role, but not to be saying we're supporting and nation building when the nation itself continually crumbles beneath us. Yeah. Some of that has to be on the people in Afghanistan themselves. Who are they going to be? Like I just don't feel that we can afford to, from a social standpoint, from a interpersonal standpoint, from an international political standpoint, from an economic standpoint. I just don't think that we can stay somewhere like that forever.
And you lost public support for it.
Definitely.
So I mean, like
not as quickly as I thought they would, actually, because this has been truly a debacle for a couple of presidents now.
Right. Well, I think with Obama in 2008, of course, you had the financial crisis. So that started to really change things. Then when Obama was elected, it was really Iraq. Let's get out of Iraq. Yeah. Afghanistan got lost in the shuffle. And I don't know if you remember a few years ago us talking about how Afghanistan's never in the news and we're there fighting and people were dying. Why is it never in the news?
Right.
And it got put on the back shelf.
Yeah.
Even though we were signaling, I think, politically with Obama and then Trump that we kind of want to end that too. And then, of course, once we got out of Iraq, I guess that was 2014,
we tried to get out of there, too, and then there was insurgency and we had to go back.
And then we had to go back,
and then same thing with Afghanistan. We tried to pull out and we had to end up going back. But it was clear that they weren't going to be able to handle it, and the insurgencies rose pretty quickly. But what that really told me, and anybody who was really paying attention, was that we are not having the successes there that we had hoped nor proclaimed. Oh, it's going so well. Well, no, it really is not, because the moment you step away and it all crowds back in on you, negatively, then you're not having the successes that you had sought. And I think that they've known that for a long time at the State Department. I mean, the Pentagon, not the Pentagon Papers, that's Vietnam, but the Afghan papers came out, and they basically admitted, this is several years ago now, and it barely made news, where they admitted that they didn't know what they were doing. We didn't really have a clear plan or a strategy going in, nor have we developed one in the time that we've been there, and we probably need to think about getting out. So so Trump does his thing, sets the date with the Taliban, doesn't negotiate with the Afghan government. Next thing you know, here's Biden, and he's like, okay, we're going to hold that deadline because they're going to insist that we do, because there's going to be more increased bloodshed and attacks against American civilians and we had a lot of civilians in the country. I don't know the exact number. So we had military personnel plus all these other people, diplomats and whatnot, right, and their families even. So do you risk more attacks on them because you didn't hold the timeline that the previous administration had set, where they were determined that you were going to? And we could say, no, screw you, we're going to stay, but then it's fixing to be a hell of a fight. It's just going to be. So it all basically boils down to, I think we had to get out, especially after you make that deal. But here's the big, and I've got mixed feelings about this too, because on one hand, this drawdown and evacuation turned into the largest humanitarian airlift in human history. Over 100 and something thousand people were airlifted pretty quickly out of that country. However, it's a debacle on multiple levels. The people that we left behind, the people that are still trying to get out, Americans that still can't get out, we're trying to find other people to help. We did not, and here's my biggest punch aside from that, because you want to get all your people out, and the people that we promised we would get out.
Yeah.
We did not coordinate our efforts with our allies. We had a few people helping us, but we really just sort of ignored them and did what we wanted to do. And that is really causing ripples, because there were a lot of people
with the international community.
Because Trump was very much, American isolationist, America first, screw all our allies.
You could see
and
it
really,
with Trump, but not Biden, with that.
Right, so when Biden comes in, a lot of the international community that we've had as our allies in the past were like, it's going to be a better day. He's promising more cooperation. Well, guess what? They're mad at Uncle Joe, because that is not what happened here. Right. We did not coordinate with them. We did not rely on our allies. We did not share communications with them. We basically went it alone and left a lot of their people hanging out to dry too, and they're pissed at us. And so now it's even more strained, because now Joe, on top of the political fallout that he has here at home, there's an international political fallout, because he had promised one thing and now it looks like he did not follow through there either. So he's got some real fixing to do. He's got some crisis management to take care of on multiple levels. So it could have gone better.
Yeah,
I don't know how, because I'm not a military strategist, but I'm just saying.
You could debate whether we should have been there in the first place, how much we should have helped, were we ever going to get where we wanted to go. But yeah, seeing Afghan babies being handed to Americans,
that's heartbreaking.
It's how bad it can get there, and they know how bad it can get there, and having people hang on, and knowing the Vietnam War is still in our recent memory, and how eerily similar that is.
That's a good way to put that. Eerily similar.
It's just like, did we not? I mean, we teach history, and one of the reasons you teach history, so you're doomed to repeat it if you don't. I mean, we did it. We repeated it nearly verbatim, even worse with Afghanistan. And despite the heroic humanitarian effort to get people out of there.
And this has nothing to do with the military personnel on the ground. This has nothing to do with, this is not an anti-military thing that we are saying. Please understand that.
Yes.
Our people went there and served. Same thing in Vietnam. People went there and served. They did what they were asked to do. They believed in what they were doing. We have friends and colleagues who have served in Afghanistan and in Iraq, and they talked about how they really believed in the mission and how we were helping individual people in small communities, and we're providing safety. And so I honor that. But at the same time, from the administrative standpoint, that's my catch.
That's the bureaucracy,
the bureaucratic element of that. Sending people to do those things, was that the right thing to do? Those things can now be debated, I think.
I mean, I think we still have the greatest military strength, and the way that our chain of command works, the way the division of power is separated, we have a strong military.
It's probably not even the military complex itself. It's probably the politicians running the military complex.
And there's diplomats. There's so many people involved. I just wish, knowing that we knew this for months. It's not like this just sprang up one day. We should have had a better, a lot of it's, our military could do their job if they would let them. Mm-hmm. Allow our military to go in there, secure the area, get everybody out that needs to get out, all the civilians, and then we pull out.
I would be curious to know how our military personnel were hamstringed.
Yeah, they were
by
hamstringed.
Political red tape.
I guarantee you it was political hamstringing that caused our military to look, because it makes the military look bad that they goofed on this. But I guarantee you it's some sort of communication, maybe between the branches.
Yeah.
It could be administrative.
I don't know that it's a military goof, and I don't think that's what you were saying. But it was a goof on somebody's part.
Bad, yeah.
It looked like that, yeah.
Right.
Sure, and I've had a lot of people, I've heard people, again, politicians screaming at each other over this.
Our military is very capable.
Sure, yeah.
Of great things and has done great things for humanity. This could have been no exception. I mean, they could have done the same thing here, but there was something going on, and we maybe we'll never know. But something in the chain of command that screwed this over. Somebody or several people, just things happening at once that just made this look like some sort of craziness, trying to get out of there. And it's so sad that we have pictures from Vietnam that look so like we've done this. Why are we doing this again?
The embassy on fire, helicopters flying out with loads of people. We're trying to transport people out as fast as we can. People lined up trying to. Oh, it's just it's such a bizarre echo of that other story.
If we're going to learn though something from Vietnam, another thing that you could say as of now is no one really looks back at Vietnam and go, "Man, we should have stayed longer." Right. We cut ties. We left. It looked horrible. But
they go, Afghanistan's our longest war. Okay, well, let's be real clear about Vietnam. We were in Vietnam from 1954 to well, our diplomats were there until 75, but we were there militarily until 73. Mm-hmm. So that's dang near 20 years right there. And again, were we there in full capacity? No, we were there a lot of times. Again, it was nation building. We're trying to secure their political system. We're trying to defend the South from the North and all that stuff. But it just there's so much, and we could spend I bet we could do a long podcast on the similarities between these two things. Yeah. And let's understand that just because Afghanistan is now in the hands of the Taliban doesn't mean that they're going to be able to secure it either, right? Because there's protests going on in the streets right now. They have been going on. They're trying to scare people the way they had scared people before, shooting guns over their heads. But you've got thousands of women in the streets of Kabul right now protesting for their equal rights and their voice in government and their, we're not going back in. So we'll see what happens. And are there continued insurrections within South Afghanistan? And it happened that way in Vietnam too. Like when the North Vietnamese took South Vietnam, it didn't just get like a cakewalk overnight. It got real ugly for a whole lot of people, and millions of people fled the country. Same thing that's going on here too. That's another thing our allies are worried about too. More people fleeing out of this region.
Yep.
And they already have a stress on their system because of COVID and the economic woes that go along with that, plus all the migrants that have been happening from the other wars in the area, and Syria and in the Sudan, and the stuff that's still boiling over in tremendous areas all across that region. So many people have fled into Europe that they've put pressure on that system. Will more people make that system better? I mean, this has a chance to get uglier still, so we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to be debating this. This is a gray area in foreign policy. So basically the Spider-Man quote, with great power comes great responsibility. Yeah. And here's the question that every American needs to figure out their answer to is, if America is the only country who can really do something about something bad going on in another country, like humanitarian rights or people being murdered or people being gassed, we could actually go in and stop it, but should we? Like that, and it varies case by case. Well, and it's like, we can't save the world.
But here's the other side of that. If we aren't willing to step in and help people, there will be other countries that we are not really allies with, China, Russia,
India,
who might really be interested in taking our spot as the leadership position. Yeah. So on one hand, we have to think about what it's doing to our country as well. So Trump was right about that. What is this doing to our country? Mm-hmm. On the other hand, we can't isolate ourselves from our international responsibilities, because if we want to maintain our superpower status, son, we best be monitoring some other things that are happening and helping people who cannot help themselves.
Absolutely.
Other people will either go in there and win them over as friends from us, or they will go in there and take them over and we will not have the ability to try to help them ever in the future. And you just don't want to see that go down those paths either.
That's why the international alliance, the global alliance and when I use that, I know a lot of people, especially conservatives, cringe. But we do need other countries on our team. We can't do it all by ourselves. And especially when you have
even
countries like
if it's
China,
just talking about trade.
Just trade, yeah. But even economic interest, of course, that does a lot in these foreign countries. Mm-hmm. Afghanistan, any of the countries, they still rely on trade. They still rely on
we hope is, Afghanistan specifically is what do you call that when the country relies mostly on their main product is drugs? What do you call that? I forget. Narco state?
Narcos, yeah.
Afghanistan's a narco state. That's their largest commodity is basically opium, black market, heroin, and that kind of stuff. So are they going to be able to develop an industry? Well, things have to calm down first, and we'll see where it goes. Is this going to be the kinder, nicer, more gentle version of the Taliban? Taliban 2.0? I don't know. It doesn't look like it so far. You got dudes who have been deemed as international terrorists with $5 million bounties on their heads who are now part of their government.
I know.
That's not a good sign. But it doesn't mean it's going to stay that way.
And you feel for the Afghan people because they're the ones that's going to suffer
obviously.
The most.
Yeah, you feel for people that are caught in the middle of that innocents who have had, and I'm sure there are people still alive from back in the 1970s when Afghanistan was actually still a functioning kingdom.
Yeah.
Late 60s, early 70s is when that started to fall apart.
Yeah, and Google pictures of Afghan people back in the day, and they look very different than they do today.
That taste of democratic process and modernity that they had, which was ripped from them basically for, again, political strife. And then they've gotten a taste of it again in some of the bigger cities especially. But the rural areas haven't changed. The rural areas are still massively conservative. I think that's part of what we're seeing. And so will these people be able to go back and find some sort of balance in their life? Vietnam has been able to do that. It took a long time for them to find themselves. There's lots of struggle and strife in that story. But modern Vietnam is much more stable. And everybody has challenges. I'm not saying it's a perfect society, but it's better than it was when we were there as a military political entity. And we've actually normalized relations with that country by now. Can we do the same thing with Afghanistan in the future? I mean, you would like to think so. You would hope so. How can we be friends with this country that's so vehemently the government I'm talking about right now, not the people of Afghanistan, because I'm separating the two things out. But how do we deal with them, And how would we convince, even if things do calm down there, how would we convince the Afghan people that we promised we would protect and yet we've left behind? How would we ever convince them to trust us again?
Yeah, I know. We're going to be paying for this in probably multiple ways over the next decade, trying to repair relationships. And, you just hope that we can recover and that the Afghan people, and like you said, maybe Taliban 2.0, maybe they're more concerned with human rights, and maybe they can do some things to get invited into the more economic.
Hey, speaking of 9/11 stuff, did you see that they're finally putting Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and some of those Guantanamo boys on trial?
Oh, are they really?
Yeah,
I didn't see that.
Yeah, it's like day 2 or 3 now. They're finally giving them their day in court. I don't know how it's going. I need to check on that, but yeah, they've been in prison down there, and their lawyers are like, our guys were tortured, and so we need to have, there's this, so there's going to have that conversation. And we're like, we didn't torture you, we waterboarded you. So there's going to be that conversation. Have we violated their human rights by keeping them in jail down there for so long without jurisprudence?
Right.
But it's a military prison, so they play by different rules. And if you're an enemy combatant, especially an international terrorist who's admitted to his involvement in 9/11, you wonder where that's going to go. But I think everybody deserves their day in court.
Yeah, that'll be interesting, too, to see how that plays out. Well, with the time we have left, let's do something a little lighter, because we've been going for a while.
A little lighter. Well, I've got a question. Anything could be lighter, honestly.
That's true. I've got a question for you. So I do the top 100 most influential Americans, and I do it by category. So we've been doing scientists. Okay. And here's my problem. Uh-oh. A guy by the name of Charles Goodyear gets a lot of credit for the development of vulcanized rubber.
Yeah.
Another guy named Leo Baekeland gets a lot of credit for the first cheap, practical plastic.
Okay.
Tupperware, things like that. And their stories are similar in certain ways. So the question is, who should be ranked higher as far as in worldwide global influence? The guy in 1844 who patented vulcanized rubber, which, you think through that. It's got a lot of uses in electricity as a non-conductor. It's got uses in waterproof, so it's ocean, marine, things like wetsuits.
It's not just tires,
boots
y'all.
and tires. And
Not just tires.
not just tires, which is what people, shoes. And so rubber has such an important role that really nothing.
Plastic.
But plastic. The other one that basically took the place of metal.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Right now, I have plastic. I have bakelin a couple places higher on the wall.
I was leaning towards that, especially with. I mean, if I had put them when plastic first came out compared to when rubber first came out, I think that rubber probably had more of an immediate impact. Mm-hmm. But maybe plastic has had more of a diverse impact.
And there's natural rubber trees.
Sure.
Yeah. And then we chemically made it vulcanized.
You ever seen that? Like for real? Like it's gummy and nasty and oh my God. Yeah. You can't get it off your skin.
Hey, so we have that, but then you have this plastic that is chemically created. It started with photographic paper, actually. Anyhow.
Oh.
And so if you're listening to this podcast, students, that's the question.
I will
rubber or plastic.
I will bet that I will come in contact with more things that have plastic parts today than things that have even rubber gaskets or something that simple.
Yeah. It's hard to know though as you walk away in your rubber shoes and you're getting your rubber car tires and I mean they're both so influential. But anyhow,
well, plastic's even in clothing now. Stretchable plastics and that I see a lot of people. Or you go to the store and you try to buy some blue jeans. Everything's got this expandable, breathable, blah blah blah. Well, you know what it is? No, they've put freaking plastic in the. It's not just denim anymore. Everything's got this. You remember when? I can't remember the jeggings. You remember jeggings?
Oh yeah,
they were like pants and leggings.
Yeah,
everything's got a little bit of that in it now. Seems like.
No, I don't mind that actually because like I grew up in the '90s when hammer pants were popular.
Oh yeah,
and I loved the freedom of big loose. And everything I bought was baggy, loose. And then all of a sudden that went out of fashion.
The dance. Did you try the dance?
Oh yeah.
In front of people, or did you do it by yourself?
Yeah, by myself. Probably. And I think I pulled something probably. But when that went out of fashion and
things they're milking cows in your tank.
Oh yeah, every time. No. But yeah, now that things are tighter, I don't mind things that stretch.
Yeah,
if it's going to be tight,
sure.
I want to be able to drop kick somebody in the face if I have to, instead of rip it.
Jean-Claude Van Damme. You want to be able to get up there
just in case. You never know.
I'm hoping skinny jeans go away because I was really never a fan of that.
Oh, no. It's not comfortable. It can't be. I don't wear skinny jeans. I just wear, normal. Yeah. And I'm not a fan of that because I got so used to loose and baggy, baby. Woo!
Comfort.
All right. Well, that concludes our first episode back. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.